Hello and welcome to the latest episode of a Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and this is Thursday. This is the Lower League show. But, dear listener, you may be asking yourself, you may be asking me, obviously you can't ask me directly, but you may be wondering, Fowler, you said at the end of Monday's show we were going to be treated to Telfer and Fraser. Well, I should never ever preempt what's going to happen on Thursday's show, because it seems like every single time I do, something bad happens, which means the podcast doesn't either happen or somebody has to drop out. So it's Fraser Clarke that's had to drop out. His shifts weren't what he thought they were going to be at his work, so he's working right now as we're recording this. But to help save us, I am joined by the one, the only, Craig G Telfer. Craig, how's it going?
I'm very well, Fowler. I'm very well, and I'm sure the listeners would have been disappointed that it was Fraser that had to drop out and not me, because I'm sure they'd much rather listen to him this evening. But no, I'm sure you and I will we'll do our best. I was going to say we'll have fun. I don't think we'll have fun, but we will do our best. That's one thing we can guarantee you, our best.
Think we'll get one laugh, one potential laugh.
Right, we'll have a laugh counter. Or we'll have a potential laugh counter. I think that's better. We'll have a potential laugh counter. And if there's anything that tickles that needle on it, we can say that's been a success.
There we go. That's reaching for the stars there. Right. This is more of a grab bag episode, and that we are going to go through games in each division, but there was a bit more happening in League One and League Two which caught our eye. And there's also a Challenge Cup game that took place on Tuesday night, which we should definitely get to, so that will be happening. But we'll begin in the Championship with Airdrieonians 3, Dunfermline 0. For all the Dunfermline fans who I think were just happy, like Michael Tidser come in, I don't know if he was necessarily their first choice, but it was somebody that done well in the division below with Kelty Hearts, and they would have been pleased it just wasn't James McPake in charge anymore. And I can imagine all of them reflecting on that hiring at like 5 o'clock on Saturday. It's kind of like the Homer Simpson neck collar gif, where they're like, not sure about this anymore because, well, put it simply, that was Airdrie's first win since the opening day of the season, and they could have won by more.
Yeah, I actually feel quite sorry for the Airdrieonians fans. You're brilliant. Our first win in the league since the beginning of August. I can't wait to hear what the guys have got to say about it. And you start by going in really hard on Michael Tidser, so fair play to you. I mean, I watched the highlights just actually before we jumped in this podcast, and where the Dunfermline filmed the game from, that was in amongst the fans on the opposite stand from the Airdrie supporters. And it's really weird because it's the home team, and when they're second and third goals in, they're accompanied to boos rather than they are cheers. And I think that the Dunfermline fans will be bitterly disappointed with this, because after the apparent progress that had been made after James McPake left the club, they had two good results and three good performances under John McLaughlin's temporary charge of the club. Remember, they drew 3-3 with Falkirk. I don't think many people were expecting them to get anything from that game. Turned in their best performance of the season by beating Partick Thistle 4-1. And they lost 2-0 to Ayr United, but they think they'd broadly done quite well in that match up until an injury saw them had to rejig the team. That set them in a pretty good foundation for a new manager to come in and really set a marker out for things. And Tidser did get off to a good start, a pretty straightforward 3-0 win over Stenny in the Scottish Cup. Again, against a fairly, all relatively speaking, mediocre opposition compared to what Dunfermline are looking to do. But the performance there, judging by what I saw from the highlights and what I read online, it felt as though McPake has never left. It felt as though we just saw a repeat of the kind of stuff that we've been used to seeing from Dunfermline, where it's slow, it's unimaginative, it's quite pedestrian, quite easy to play against. And Airdrie were a team that took full advantage of Dunfermline's just slackness, really. And I don't want to talk too long, so I'm sure you're going to come on to this, but Michael Tidser in his post-match interview, something that will have really alarmed Dunfermline supporters, he says, I'm sticking to my principles. This is how I play football. That's how his Kelty Hearts team played. I saw his Kelty Hearts team a number of times this season. That's how his team want to play football. That's what's going to happen with Dunfermline, and it's you're going to have to get used to it, effectively.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear after you've been gubbed 3-0 by a team that's bottom of the league by an absolute mile. The one thing you can maybe say is that it is and you can see it early on. There was actually a little bit of little bit of hope for them early in the game, where there was some promising early moves with Joe Chalmers having a shot,
Yep.
Kane Richie Hosler had a shot, Ewan Otto had one that the keeper had to do quite well. It looked more like a cross, to be fair, but they looked threatening. You can see them trying to build their way through the lines, break through the press, and get through an opposition that way. I didn't see them under McPake, so I know that McPake wanted them to kind of play out for the back, but maybe if there's a different way that Tidser wants them to build, you could say that, okay, this might take time, and it's only 1 week. And I think it was actually Fraser in the notes that he left me saying, like, it's not working for Ange Postecoglou. It's not going to work for Michael Tidser. If results are going badly, he's just going to stick to his principles. The thing is, I know that isn't working for Postecoglou at the moment, but when he first came to Celtic, it did take a while to kind of build up to how he wanted his players to play. So that's the to look on the positive side for Dunfermline, that Tidser needs more than 1 week in the job to get them to properly implement his system. Of course, on the negative side, as you could say, he just doesn't have the players for it. Dunfermline are in a relegation battle, and maybe he just should be pragmatic to keep them up. And then he gets the summer, he gets the ability to bring in his own players. I mean, they still have that ability now, but it's only till Monday, and he won't be able to make too many moves. But in the summer, he can completely overhaul the squad, get them in a full training session. That might get them fully going with how he envisions seeing them playing. But yeah, if I was a Dunfermline fan, it's only one game, but I would be worried.
I think so, because after seeing them, how well they'd done, we mentioned there how well they'd done on McLaughlin. Dunfermline looked really good when they had the ability to mix it up a wee bit, go a bit more direct, be a bit more vertical. You know, you've got some strong runners in the team, like for all his limitations, Craig Whiting's somebody that can stretch the game, you know, somebody can put himself about a wee bit, perhaps lacks the quality, but definitely has the fitness to do that and hold the ball up and bring other people into play. And just when you're coming up against a team, we mentioned there, it's nearly 6 months since their last win. And if it had Dunfermline won that match, you know, they could have put together, I think it was like a 12-point gap over them at the bottom of the table, which is like, even at this stage, you'd have to say that'd be fairly insurmountable. But now I just think it just adds, you've got a new manager coming in, he played against Stenny. That was just one to get your feet under the table, you know. Then he's got this other game where you're playing the worst side in the division, haven't won in almost 6 months. You get pretty comprehensively beaten by them, using the same kind of football that we saw from them earlier in the season that didn't necessarily work. You would be a wee bit, oh my goodness, do we still have a receipt? Can we still go back to Kelty Hearts and trade them back? It is early days, you know, it is very early days, but just when you see some of the particularly that third goal that Airdrie scored, and you've got to say, I thought the third goal, that Lewis McGrattan's pass to set up Ben Wilson, that I think that's the best assist I've seen all season. That is, watching it, I was like, oh, that is so good to open up your body like that with a first time pass where you think he'd be hitting it with his left, but he just opens up with his right foot just to direct the ball perfectly into Ben Wilson's pass to set up the scoring chance. Great assist. But it's just very, very easy for Airdrieonians to play through them. And this is an Airdrie team that haven't really been playing through anyone at all this season. So that's the sort of thing you would be worried about. And I mean, I'm not going to say how Dunfermline fans should be reacting to defeats like that, but I can see to an extent why there would have been the reaction when those goals went in and the reaction at full time.
So I don't know if you watched I think there was 2 highlights, wasn't there? There was both Airdrie and Dunfermline.
Yes.
Yeah. Which one did you watch?
I actually watched them both because I watched this on Monday. I watched the Airdrie highlights. The commentator there, he sounded like he'd taken too much Calpol before he jumped in the microphone. And then I watched the Dunfermline highlights just earlier.
Well, I don't know if the Airdrie highlights included it, but the Dunfermline highlights did. And I really hope this was a conscious decision from the editor to basically say, look at how bad this team are that we're playing and look at what they're doing to us. Because what I'm referring to is just before the third goal starts, there is a pass from Craig Watson that I don't even know what he's trying to do, but he just ends up melting it out of the park for a goal kick. It goes nowhere near one of his Airdrie teammates. And then from that, Dunfermline pass it out, lose the ball again, and Airdrie score the third. And I just wondered if maybe he was trying to show how bad the performance is by basically saying, look at what Shaughan said the other day.
Yeah, it's murder.
Look, they have murder.
There was a bit there in that match, and I think the game state I think it might have been at 2-0 at this point. I think Oluwayemi was on the ball, and the ball was getting passed between the goalkeeper and the centre backs, and you could hear some of the shouts, and the crowd were just like, fucking just get it up the park. You're 2 goals down. Be more direct, be more direct. Play against a team that have shown that they can be got at this season. And I just felt it just all felt a little bit passive, and I think that they were a good team for Airdrie to have taken on at the moment, and so it proved.
Another thing I just wanted to point out as well, just to kind of add insult to injury, they've just signed Connor Young. They're pretty happy about that. Connor Young was excellent again for Edinburgh City this season, and he misses an absolute sitter.
When it's not your day, it's not your day. I think it's a great signing. I'll be honest, I think this is a really, really good signing from Dunfermline. It's really imaginative, and it's something that I think more clubs should be looking to do if they don't do it already. Like, go into part-time football, look at young guys that have perhaps dropped down a level and are looking to kick on. And I think everyone, I don't know if you've seen it, and it's probably something we should discuss later on, but Michael McIndoe's post-match interview following their defeat at East Fife, he was asked by Dave about Connor Young, and he's absolutely over the moon. Absolutely over the moon. I think it's testament to it's testament to the player as well. First and foremost, testament to the player, like the hard work that you do to score that many goals for an unfancied team, and just after 6 months, get a move into full-time football. But it also says a lot for Michael McIndoe as well, and the coaching that they've got there. So that's something that everyone at Edinburgh should be proud of. He will be a very good player for them. Very inauspicious debut, missing if you want to be kind, call it a very presentable chance, but he'll be a good player, and I think that he'll give them something that they don't have. I think we mentioned there guys like Chris Kane, Craig Whiten, bald, can hold up the ball well, like can put themselves about. He is actually, Connor got a great left foot, and will add a bit of cutting edge that they don't have.
Is there anything to say for Airdrie before we move on?
Definitely.
Great to get that result, but they're still 10 points adrift. But is there any hope?
You know something, right? When I watched Sports Scene for the fourth round of the Scottish Cup highlights, they showed the Airdrie Dumbarton highlights. Airdrie absolutely demolished them, finished 5-1. And Jonathan Sutherland asked Stephen Naismith, is this the kind of result that they could kick on and change their season? And I remember watching it and saying, like, what are you asking him that for? Absolutely no chance. And then they follow up with by winning against Dunfermline. It was great listening to Rhys McCabe's post-match interview, because he said, this is the team that he knows. This is the Airdrie team that he knows what they expect from, where it's guys that are good in possession, that use the ball well. There is that degree of penetration there. This is what his Airdrie team were last season. And however, he also acknowledged that ultimately it doesn't mean much unless you follow up with another good result. They've got Queen's Park at home on Saturday. Queen's Park not having the best of seasons. I suppose better than last season when they are actually looking up the way than struggling at the bottom. But it's a presentable fixture, and if Airdrie can build on that, then you could say that if you want to compare the two teams that are neck and neck with each other, you've got the Dunfermline team, new managers come in, perhaps wants to play a football that isn't appropriate for the circumstances, with an Airdrie team there'll be players coming back from injury, hitting a bit of form, albeit back-to-back wins against like Dumbarton, Dunfermline. I still think Airdrie will go down. That's not particularly a bold thing to say, but it does make it interesting. That was a 6-pointer, and it was vital that Airdrie got the win there. So fair play to them, and fair play to Lewis McGrattan as well, best player in the park, and just that assist was just breathtaking how good it was.
Okay, let's move into League One, where it was a bad weekend for... This was originally going to set up as a bad weekend for both our teams, yes. But of course I don't support a team in League One. I'm a Hearts fan, and I'm just happen to be wearing a East Fife hoodie at this point in time.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, I got it when we went to East Fife for the hospitality, and I'll wear it on a view for the terrace at some point.
Brilliant. That's very good. See, a view for the terrace. I buy my clothes and I never wear them until I'm actually on the show. They stay in their plastic wrapping until I actually go on the show. So it's very bold of you to do that.
Yeah, to wear it and not get stains on it, which means I won't be able to wear it on the TV.
What about your sort of your jock track jacket, the one that had sort of gravy down the sleeves, and you couldn't wear that?
I eventually wore it, did I not? Aye, I got the stains out enough, and also they were in a position where I could hide them underneath like my arm on the table, so
Yeah,
that was fine.
if you remember that episode when Craig Fowler basically just sat in his hands, that's why he had gravy down both sleeves.
I think it was orange juice. It was orange in colour.
Was it right? Well, I Fowler. When I just think of stains and you, that's the first basically condiment that comes to my mind is gravy. So thank you for clearing that up. It was orange juice, not gravy.
Yeah, so this section was originally going to be a bad weekend for both the presenters of this podcast because Dumbarton lost 3-1 at Queen of the South. We will talk about that game, even though Fraser's not here. But we'll begin with Stennismuir 0, Cove Rangers 4. Before we get into asking questions about Stenny and Cove, it just should be pointed out, what a goal from Fraser Fivey.
Brilliant, yeah. Fraser Fivey, best player in the park. Fraser Fivey, just anytime I see him, and that's watching him at Cove Rangers when they were in when they won League One. I certainly got when they won League One, then they're neck and neck with Airdrie a couple of seasons back. You just watch him and just think, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? How come you're playing at this level? And against Stenhousemuir at the weekend, there, just everything he does his passes is so good. He's just so intelligent the way he uses the ball. He can add gives the team so much thrust and so much drive. And the goal he scored from the position that he was in, pretty much on the byline with your back facing away from goal. It's bad defending from Stenhousemuir to allow the player to come inside. And then the angle opens up for him to have a shot, but it was a brilliant effort, and you could see as soon as it left his foot, that's going in. And it was a brilliant goal. It capped a really good performance from him and a really good performance of Cove Rangers.
Yeah, and to ask about Cove, are they any good? They have results that seem to catch the eye, and it seems to happen like once a month. Because it's like once a month, I'm like, I should try and include a Cove Rangers player in Team of the Week, and then it ends up not happening because there doesn't seem to be any Cove Rangers fans that exist, and they don't give out Man of the Match awards on their official social media. So it becomes difficult.
They're a funny side. That they remind me. I think Shaughan and I were talking about Annan Athletic a couple of weeks ago, and we said that Annan are probably going to lose most games, but they'll ultimately win one, or they'll get an unexpected point. Like just the weekend's a perfect example. They're 2-0 down against Montrose, and then Tam Muir getting a double to dig out a point, which sort of keeps them just ahead of Inverness Caledonian Thistle for the time being. But Cove are the same. There's a number of times where they just pick up draws. They can never put together a consistent run of results, and you're thinking, surely this is it for Paul Hartley. Surely something's going to change here. And then they turn in a performance like that. They were really, really good in this match. Really, really good. Fivey was the star of the show, but I thought like Adam Emsley had a really good game. Mitch Megginson had a good game. Two centre-backs played well, albeit they didn't have much to deal with. And I just thought that I don't want to take anything away from them, but Stennismuir were really, really sloppy. Really, really sloppy with a lot of their approach play, a lot of their attempts to try and play out from the back. And Cove gleefully took full advantage of it. So you have to credit them for that. I haven't played them. Stenny have played them twice already this season, beating them 3-2 and 3-0. They beat them 3-0 up in midweek when they were up in Aberdeen. And I think going into this game, just with Stennismuir's sort of rickety form at the moment, I was a little bit concerned about it. I thought when Cove scored their first goal, which was Declan Glass sweeping home from about 12 yards, I thought, right, well that's annoying, but it's certainly you can come back from it. And then 60 seconds later, they got the ball in the net again. Just really poor from Stennismuir at that point, thinking nothing's going to come from this, and turned into 3-0, and then the second half was a bit of a non-event. Fivey's goal at the death really lit it up, but I thought they managed the game very well. Stennismuir huffed and puffed, but Cove's house was made of bricks, and they were able to keep the big bad wolf at bay.
Fivey's goal was one of those where you just love to see it with the ball properly sails through the air, and the goalie is just rooted to the spot. It's also really good technique as well to do it while he's kind of almost running away from goal. Yeah,
but there's not many players that can do that or attempt to do a shot. And talk about the term game state. There's things that you would try. I mean, it's 3-0 up. The game's petering out. Give it a go. But he's one of the players that can do something like that. And it was a stunning goal.
Right, let's get to Queen of the South 3, Dumbarton 1. Oof. And Oh my God. The two goals that Dumbarton conceded, well, sorry, obviously they conceded 3 goals, but the first two were shocking defending. And you can kind of see why that they've got the worst defence in the league. They've conceded 41 goals in 21 games, have just kept one clean sheet. There are mitigating factors, which we will get to, but I want to go through these 2 goals, forensically go through them, because they are that bad. The first one, which is only 3 minutes into the game, Cammy Clarke puts in a kind of, the kind of half-hearted tackle you'd maybe attempt if you were 10 goals down at fives with a couple of minutes to go. Sena Nyang, he's right there beside them. The two of them have got it covered, and that's not the first time I'll say this, two of them have it covered, but he thinks that Clark's got it, so he just kind of backs off, switches off for a second. That allows Bruce Dickinson to just split the pair of them.
Yeah.
Ball comes into the penalty area. Josh Walker is going for it. Carlo Pignatello is in position to boot it out the park, or to at least put in a more robust challenge than he does. I think he's trying to flick it away, and he doesn't realise Walker's there. He's shot, then Walker is on the deck, manages to get away a shot, saved by the goalie, comes out to Brooks. His finish isn't great.
Yeah.
It does give Christian Webster a chance to clear it, but instead he doesn't quite get his foot around it, and he smashes it in the corner of the net. Tremendous stuff.
Aye, it's like watching this. Christian Webster's played twice now for Dumbarton. He made his debut in the Scottish Cup against Airdrie, finished 5-1. And I thought he was especially poor here. I don't like digging out young players because he's on loan from Rangers. I think he had a spell at Cumbernauld. He's played a couple of times for the B team, spell at Cumbernauld Colts. And so this is really his first chance playing like proper football. And it's been I think a steep learning curve for him. I think that goal was bad, just the inability to clear. I think he just kind of trips over his own feet, really. He's off balance, and so you've got a degree of sympathy for him there.
He's of all the players involved, he's the one that's definitely the least at fault for goal number one.
He's the least involved, also looks the most involved, given the fact that he sort of almost collapses in the ball. You know, like some desperate soldier in the First World War trying to dive on top of a grenade, but ultimately wipes out his platoon anyway. You know, everyone dies. I thought it was the second goal was really bad because when the ball comes in, I can see what he's trying to do. He's trying to control it. I think he's trying to control it, use his pace to get away from his attacker. Forgive me, I can't remember who it is, and then just lump up the park. But what he should have done, just boot it out of play, stick it into Dumfries somewhere. But instead he tries to control it and gets robbed, and then sets up Adam Brooks for an easy finish for the second goal.
And that's after two players again for Dumbarton just leave it to each other, because it's him and Mark Dunnan who initially, the ball's bouncing towards the two of them, and the two of them just both stop because they think the other one's going to deal with it. And it's Webster does actually end up getting a touch. You're right, he actually initially manages to flick a foot out. This time when he flicks a foot out, he does well, because he stops it running through on goal for what I presume would have been Brooks again. But you're right, when he should just lump it into the stand, he decides to take one more touch and runs right into Josh Walker.
Yeah, but that's the sort of thing that you'll learn from. You know, you'll learn. It's just unfortunate that when you do get young boys on loan, again, repeating points I've made to Shaughan in the past, they make their mistakes. Unfortunately, it's on your dime. They're learning football, and you hope to benefit from it in some way. But when they make their mistakes, it's going to cost you. And I think going forward, he will now know if you're running at the ball at a funny angle when somebody's bearing down your shoulders, just boot it away and give the team the chance to reset themselves and get into position. Don't try to be too smart on it. And that's something I don't think you'll see that happening again from Christian Webster.
I also quite enjoyed Mark Dunnan falling over as he tried to turn and get back into position.
Yeah, but I think when I saw Mark Dunnan score, his equaliser at 1-1's a well-taken header. And I saw him celebrate. I think that goal would have meant a lot to him. You know, I can imagine that he was perhaps getting a wee bit of pelters from the stand. You know, I think he pretty much made his name for himself at Queen of the South. He was part of that excellent team under Alan Johnson. I think 2012, 2013, when they smashed open the second division and won the Challenge Cup. I think he'd been part of the team where Chris Higgins got headbutted by Aaron Muirhead.
Yes.
Remember that?
He must have been, yeah.
Yeah, I bet there's a few people who wanted to headbutt Chris Higgins in that time, but Aaron Muirhead was the only one that actually stood up and did it. So fair play. But yeah, it was just a really concerning performance from Dumbarton, because I mean they are now really isolated at the foot of the table. Very difficult to see anyone other than themselves finishing bottom of the table. I think Fraser, like I've been texting him, Fraser and I will text each other pretty much after most games, just for a chat, how was your game and so on, and find out a wee more. And he's always very, very good at being, I think he gives he's obviously subjective, but I think he's a very balanced perspective of the match. So he's always a good person to talk to about them. But I think even somebody who's a big mark for Dumbarton, even he's accepted that relegation is going to happen. And I think it's just really a matter of time. And the thing is that Dumbarton have been able to dig out some like impressive performances and some good results. Like going up to Montrose and getting a win there, and then following up by beating Kelty Hearts. So that's like impressive. But that's now, you lose to Inverness Caledonian Thistle. That was a 6-pointer, and then you lose to you got to say a much improved and ever improving Queen of the South side. So I feel sorry for them. I think that if there are the positives, you would say, I mean, probably won't have to see Joel and Bongo starting anymore. Michael Roos coming back. Joel and Bongo's, again, don't like slagging people off, because
anytime I see his name, and I've seen it now, I think on like Pie Bovril with relation to 3 different clubs now in the Scottish lower leagues, and every time it's just fans moaning about him.
Aye, I think that what he does, he's a presence, and he can be a bit of a handful. But I just don't think he knows how to use his body properly, or jump for the ball, or hold up. Meaning, given his size and his stature, you would look at him and say that guy's a centre forward. You would you can just look at some players and I can tell what you're good at just by looking at you. You think he would be good with his back to goal, but he's not really. He's quite easy to play against.
Well, we certainly know that at one stage of his career had quite a bit of potential, because Fraser dug this up and put it on Twitter when he came across a Sweden under-17s game from a few years back where Joel Mbongo was subbed on for Alexander Isaac.
A real sliding doors moment. Who knows? Maybe in a different universe, it's Joel Mbongo who's the most coveted striker on the planet at the moment, and it's Alexander Isak that's Hamilton Accies are saying he's one of the worst players that's that he's ever been.
Is it Isak? Is that how you pronounce it?
Alexander Isak. Isak. That's how I would say it. That
shows my English football knowledge. It's like I've only ever seen his name written down.
I don't know, but I got to say, man, like Queens are beginning to hit a crest of a wave, and I mean, it's funny because see, when you look at, remember in League One for the first half of the season, you'd be like, right, you still can't call the division. Very, very difficult to say, because every team's capable of beating everyone else. And then a couple of weeks ago, you think, right, it's beginning to make a wee bit of sense now. We can see who's going to be doing what. Now it's back to how it was just a couple of weeks ago, when you see, I think is it 3 points separating the top 5 clubs at the moment, something ridiculous like that. And I think that ultimately Queen of the South will be a team that can go on and finish the playoffs. I think there's a lot of teams that have aspirations for it, and I think that Queen of the South and recent form with the players they brought in, like Brennan Dickinson being fit. Brennan Dickinson is one of the best players I've seen in that division. You can tell why he has played English lower league football, where you just got to be like physically fit. I don't watch a lot of like League One and League Two, but I assume given how frequent the games are, you just have to be super, super fit to keep on going. And he's built like a wardrobe. He's a really, really big guy. He scored a really good goal there as well. It was a really, really nice free kick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if they can keep him fit, he's going to be a key player in making sure that they can push towards the title. And I think Taylor Charters, who they've brought in from Carlisle, partly very, very highly rated at one point, and they've brought in Jordan Allen from he was at Clyde from Falkirk. And I think that once he gets up to speed and is back in tune with the demands of the division, he'll be a good signing. So I do think that that Peter Murphy is making the strides, and the board have obviously pushed the boat out a little bit to try and get into the promotion hunt.
Yeah, I just checked the table. It is 3 points between first and fifth, only
Yeah.
5 points between first and sixth. And then you get a bit of a gap to Montrose, who are seventh, who are 9 points off the top. It should be said though that Arbroath do have two
Two
games in
games in
hand.
hand. Aye.
They were the apart from Celtic, who had damage to their ground. Arbroath were the only game to be called off in the SPFL this past weekend due to the storm, and it was called off on Friday. And I wonder whether it was like any damage or if it was just like, we're the windiest ground in the country.
Just call it.
We're just going to call
Just
it
call
now.
it.
Just
No, I
going to
mean-
save everybody's time.
Like, to be fair, like there was damage at Gayfield as well. Like Gayfield
Right,
took a bit
okay.
of a battering from the storm as well. But yeah, I think
It's underwater.
I mean, if I was to think, if you were thinking of the whole of Scottish football, and I said a game in Scotland's been called off because of the wind, the first place you would say is Gayfield. That's the very first place you would say is Gayfield. But I know that we're going to maybe just do a wee roundup at the top of League One, and we're going to come on and do a bonus podcast talking about the key transfers or five interesting transfers from this window. The fact they've brought in Sam Stanton on loan from Raith Rovers, he automatically becomes the best player in that division. And they already had a pretty decent midfield in there with like Fraser Taylor and Ryan Dow, David Gold, of course, being able to play there. And it's like basically having a Rolls Royce and then adding furry dice but furry dice that can also make coffee and clean the windows at the same time. It's a ridiculous signing for the level. And I think that it's a sort of sign that'll just, I think it'll just, if everyone at that club wasn't already buzzing and really excited about where they are, it's the kind of sign that'll just take that on to the next level. I'm sure that David Gold and Colin Hamilton will be excited to work with them, and the players, and I'll be looking forward to playing with them. The fans will be wanting to see him. So great piece of business, and I think that albeit it's 2 points, but they have to win those games. You would fancy Arbroath to kick on from here.
Right, we shall go from the top of League One right to the bottom of League Two, and there were three huge games which took place. A couple at the weekend, and then one that took place on Tuesday evening. It means that the table is shaping up with Bonnyrigg are on 22 points in 8th, Stranraer are on 21 points in 9th, and Forfar are now cut adrift.
Yeah.
6 points by Stranraer, and the big result there of the three, Bonnyrigg lost to Stirling. That's slightly incidental, but we'll talk about that a little bit. But it was Forfar losing 1-0 at home to Stranraer.
Yeah.
That was a huge result, because it means that even though Stranraer then lost at the weekend, then lost on Tuesday night to Bonnyrigg and go back to 9th, they've got a bit of a cushion now. And yeah, it's fair to say things are not looking great for Forfar. We should probably start there.
Yeah, that's guy. I start with the important team first. That's a good idea. Maybe you should have done that when we were talking about Airdrie, but nevertheless, we're here. Yeah, it's looking really grim for Forfar at the moment. I mean, going by the highlights from that game, most of the highlights, I watched the Stranraer highlights because we all know that Stranraer put together an excellent package. But I would say that Forfar were the better team from this match.
Yeah.
They created most of the chances. And although
if you're watching Stranraer's highlights and the majority of chances are from Forfar, you know that they were probably the better team.
And the issues that they had was poor finishing in front of goal and not being able to take advantage. Although that he got the man of the match, I thought that Jack Lane and the Stranraer goal very, very shaky. Could have very
Josh Lane, I think.
Josh Lane, beg your pardon. Sorry, it's the other goalkeepers. It's Sam Kane and Josh Lane. That's it. Sorry, that's how you are. Sam Kane, Josh Lane. Like the Frankie Kent, Georgie Gent. That's how you differentiate them, taking these two goalkeepers on loan. Josh Lane, he's on loan from has one of the two. One's from loan from Hamilton, the one's on loan from Queen's Park.
It's Lane's on loan for Hamilton.
Right. Okay. So Josh Lane. Anyway, now I'm glad we've got to the bottom of that. But I thought the number of times like where he'd make a save and his handling was a wee bit poor, and he'd sort of pushed the ball like straight out in front of him, and they just weren't able to take advantage of that. So that was one. They couldn't. They were profligate in front of goal. Disaster for Mark McCallum from that Grant Gallagher header, because I think that Grant Gallagher's the ball gets chucked in from Robbie Foster. I think Gallagher just sort of throws himself into it, just basically directs it on goal. It didn't appear to be moving. I mean, I'm not a goalkeeper. I wasn't there, but it didn't appear to be moving with any great deal of. It wasn't so much like a bullet train; it's more like a car reversing tentatively. And I think that he just kind of like helps on his way into the net, and that's for a goalkeeper of Mark McCallum's calibre. That's a poor piece of goalkeeping, and unfortunately. It's a cliche, but cliches are often said because they're true. When you're down in the dumps, these are the sort of games that go against you. Games when you're the better side, but you can't score, and a shitey goal ruins it for you.
Aye, speaking of the goal, you could hear it from both Lawrence Nelson and Brian Martin. They both let out little kind of exclaims of surprise that the ball had ended up in the back of the net. Although I wasn't entirely sure, just because of the way the highlights had gone to that point, I wasn't entirely sure whether I was surprised that McCallum had been beaten by that header or that Stranraer just scored in general, because it seemed like fairly one-way traffic up until then.
I was looking at Stranraer. I think you might need to tell me here. So the number of goals that Stranraer scored, since about the start of December, I think Stranraer, across their league games, Stranraer have scored about 6 goals, and I think about 4 of them have been scored by Mark Russell. And it goes back to something that Chris Aitken said in a post-match interview. I can't remember what game it was after, but he said that we need to, if Mark Russell's not scoring, the team's not scoring, the other players need to take more responsibility. And it's good to see Grant Gallagher, not something that I was too familiar that he would normally do, is make like lung-busting runs into the box. I thought he was just more of a holder, more somebody that can just like dictate the tempo. But it's good to see him stepping up and well, as the captain, but taking a bit of responsibility by doing something like that. But for Stranraer to follow it up by going to Bonnyrigg and turning in a pretty mediocre performance, that's worrying. You know, I didn't see any highlights from this game, so I'm going to go on Amy Canavan, obviously friend of the podcast, member of the podcast even. And she was there watching and just said it was 2 really poor sides, but Stranraer were comfortably the worst. They're the worst team she's seen. And it's only highlights that I've been able to consume Stranraer this season, but they don't look a particularly good side. I think getting Elliot Dunlop back in on loan from Airdrieonians, that'll go some way to alleviating the creative burden and the rest of the players. He was a bit of a success before being recalled by Airdrie, and now he's back there for the rest of the season. So that'll give everyone a bit of a lift, because he is quite an exciting wee player when he's on his game. But they just seem like a pretty miserly team, but certainly not as miserly as Forfar Athletic are at the moment.
No, and I just checked that stat. Did you say 4 out of 7?
Aye.
It's 5 out of 7.
5 out of 7, right, my goodness. Right. That's worrying. I mean, they're certainly getting value for money. I think that, remember when we did the big preview podcast, you mentioned Mark Russell. I think he might be one of the best paid players at the club. So at least they are getting value for money from him. But you can't rely on one player.
And a mixed bag for Bonnyrigg over recent days, because they were certainly well beaten by Stirling.
Yeah,
that could have been. I mean, Callum Elliott after the game wasn't happy with the first half performance. Apologised for the first half performance. I mean, he could have ended up apologising for the second half performance as well if Stirling could finish a bit better in that period. But they already had the game on. That's not a criticism of Stirling. But it didn't look like it necessarily got much better. Stirling just didn't put the ball in the back of the net.
No, first a word on Stirling and Shaughan and I. Sorry, I keep referring back to old podcast. If Shaughan was here, he would know what I'm talking about. But we were talking about Stirling last week after the defeat to Peterhead, and we said that the team now is just a far better side than it was at the beginning of the season. I think they have done. The team at the beginning of the season, it looked like a sort of odds and sods where you've got like a couple of experienced players, and then it's mostly made up of youngsters. But now I think that they've actually got quite a good core through that team, and I think the pickups that they've made have all been pretty good. Robbie McNabb, we'll come on and talk about him in the bonus podcast. Get your checkbook out if you want to hear more about that. Ryan Shanley sets up, they've got a great header to set up.
I love that goal.
Yeah,
love that goal. Proper old school football, that goal. Long ball, header on, strike partner in behind, goal.
You know what, you're talking about like more old school kind of football. I know you're not necessarily watching a lot of English football, but Man City scored a goal like that at the weekend. Basically a punt of the park to Erling Haaland, was back to goal, just bodied the defender and ran in and scored. I like my football to be vertical. I like direct football where it is fast. And the tippy, I don't like saying tippy tappy stuff because that sounds really dismissive. But when the ball's knocked along the back, it's fine. But sometimes there's nothing wrong with just getting it right up to the big man and getting the flick on there. Aye, so it was James Graham that scored, and I think that when Fraser and I he wanted to talk about this game because obviously James Graham had come from Dumbarton. Didn't get much of a shot there, but was seen as quite as a good striker, and that goal's a perfect example. Great anticipation to know what Shanley's going to do, know that Shanley's got the better of his marker, and a great finish. And a special mention for Adam Brown as well, who's turned into probably, you could say, if you were to look at the signs, one of the signs of the season, because he's been absolutely fantastic. That's 10 goals now he's got for Stirling Albion since he joined them from Stenny. And you could tell watching that highlights package there. Yes, the team are 3-0 up at this point, so it's easy to play with confidence and play with flair. But a lot of the stuff that he was doing, where it was all one touch, really, really nice stuff. I mean, the surface at Fourth Bank is particularly conducive to that kind of football, and he really seems to be thriving in that environment. Really looks like he is. I think at Stenny he was perhaps in and out the team, never really nailed down a position. He play as a number 10, he plays a sort of wide attacker midfielder with license to cut inside. I think it's still an Albion. I do think the team is functioning around him, and he's thriving in that environment. So yeah, very, very good stuff for them. As for Bonnyrigg, I think it's a much needed win. Stirling Albion are a good side, so there's necessarily no shame going. I say no shame. You should have done better. I don't know if they could have had a penalty though when Callum Crane fouled Aaron Arnott when he went down in the box.
Yeah, there was that. There was a very strange decision as well later in the game.
Oh, was that to book Callum Crane?
Yeah, booked him for a foul on Kieran McGuigan.
Oh, no chance.
Crane wins the ball, but however, having given the foul, surely it's a red card.
Yeah, because if he doesn't win that, McGackey's through and goal. McGackey's through and goal to score that. And you can make your jokes and say, that he probably run out of breath but by the time he got into a shooting position. But nevertheless, that's a red card. So I don't know what I think was behind it. And the fact is, when seeing it in first inspection, I thought I was actually going to book McGackey for diving. But no, he wins in, and he the bottom of his foot connects with the ball. And so that was strange. But I think that with Bonnyrigg, what Amy said there, that the guy they picked up, Ryan Porteous, not that one, who looks like quite a decent pickup. They generally did quite well against Stranraer, but it wasn't a particularly good game of football. And there was a stat that was mentioned there. Stranraer's last 4 league victories. I know we're kind of jumping about here. Stranraer's last 4 league victories have all come on synthetic surfaces, all been away from home.
Yeah, I heard Brian and Lawrence reference that on the commentary. That is interesting.
That is there can't be many teams that have got that. So they beat Forfar, they beat the Spartans, they beat East Fife, and they beat Edinburgh City, all away from home.
The Kings of Plastic.
Aye. So I don't know. I think that Callum Elliott mentioned it in his post-match interview about the points deduction, and he said, we can't get down about the points deduction. It just happened. It's happened. Points deduction happened ages ago.
Yeah, that kind of caught my ear, as I should maybe say.
The points deduction happened ages ago, and it's the sort of thing where when you've had the initial disappointment and you're angry and you're all hepped up about it, that was months ago. You should just be in a position that it's happened. You just need to win as many games as possible. So I thought that was a bit strange. However, that was his post-match interview from Stirling Albion after they've lost. I would have liked to have heard what he'd said after beating Stranraer. Unfortunately, by the time as we're recording this podcast on the Wednesday the 29th, it hasn't been put out. So we can only go by the stuff that Amy sent over. So if you're a Bonnyrigg fan and you're listening, apologies that it's not quite as detailed on them as it could be. We're going to discuss a bit about Forfar because we kind of skipped over them a wee bit.
Oh yeah, of course, because they got a new manager in Jim Weir, but
a new old manager.
A new old manager in Jim Weir, but it does seem like the malaise that was there for just about the entirety of Ray McKinnon's time after he almost went to Forest Green Rovers. Weir has yet to pull them out of that, and time is running out for him to do so.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm a bit surprised that Forfar haven't opened the checkbook, because a team like Forfar, you've seen it before when clubs get into this position where it's like, fuck, we might get relegated here, we might drop out the SPFL altogether. You go cap in hand to your sponsors and say, listen, can you give us, I don't know, 15 grand, something like that? Can you club together, give us 15 grand so we can go out and sign Kane Hester, right, for instance, who stays locally to the area and has worked under, very successfully as well, worked under Gavin Price, who's Jim Weir's assistant, worked well when they were at Elgin. Kane Hester is now back at Elgin, so that's a different story. But do you know what I mean? These are the kind of signs where you go and sign guarantees effectively on 18-month contracts, get them in, keep them up, and then you basically can reset. You know, similar to what Montrose didn't do that, but do you know what I mean? You have that reset, that cultural reset at the club, so this can't happen again. We can't finish bottom again. I thought Stranraer might have had that in the summer there. Hasn't necessarily been the case, and they're right back down amongst it. I think the Forfar board deserve credit for allowing them to sign Craig Slater from Arbroath. I think that he never really, I think Arbroath didn't necessarily see the best of him. It's fair to say, always seemed to play his best football at Forfar. So bringing him back is one, you're getting a good player who knows the club, knows the level, whatever that means. But on top of that, you've got someone that can give the fans a bit of a bounce. He got injured in his first game and is out for the foreseeable future. There's disappointments like that. And then when you look at the other transfer business that they did, I mean, they've signed Mackenzie Lemon from Lockheed United. I can't say I know too much about him, but he was part of Paul Sheeran's Falkirk side, fell on his backside against Queen's Park at Firhill when they lost 6-0. They've also signed Marley Sweeney Rowe on loan from Dundee. He was on loan at Stennismuir for the first half of last season. Young boy, I think he's only about like 18 or 19, but he's got a lot of learning to do. A lot of learning to do, just in terms of just the physicality of the game. And just the speed at which it's played with, the aggression at which the game's played for as well. And I think that it's one thing when you're learning that, like last season, when you're at a club who are challenging for the title. The opposite this season when you're playing for a club who really are scrapping for their lives. And I think that Forfar are adrift, but I think they're a bit fortunate. It's 6 points they're off Stranraer at the moment. Might have a game in hand in them.
Yes, they are certainly 6 points adrift, and let me just confirm. Yes, there is a game in hand. Forfar have played 20 times, Stranraer have played 21 times. The problem always with that, when you talk about games in hand at the bottom of the table, is that they don't equal the same as games in hand at the top.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we talk about our Arbroath games in hand, you say that's like a positive. When you're talking about it for Forfar, you say, well, you know what I mean? It's better to have a game 6 points adrift and a game in hand than just 6 points adrift. So they do have the opportunity to claw that back.
That's certainly the case.
But there's a damaging result at the weekend. Damaging result, just in terms of not just what it means, but just in terms for morale and stuff. Because I imagine pitching up at training on the Tuesday. I don't know, man. I suppose that on one hand, when you talk to players about what you want after a defeat, it's you just want to go straight back out there and play and get out of your system. Just a total tangent here. But I remember doing a podcast, a Pele podcast with Rory Loy, and talking to him because he played in the Scottish Cup final in 2015 for Falkirk when they lost to Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Obviously, losing the cup final is a devastating feeling, but to lose it in the manner that Falkirk did, where it was like James Vincent that scored and with like minutes to go at the end, taking advantage of Jamie McDonald's mistake. And I remember Rory Loy saying, like, under normal circumstances, if you lose a game, you're back in. You've got a week to wait till the next one, till you can go back in and just get out of your system. For Falkirk then, they had the whole summer to just ruminate and stew on it, and there was a bit of turnover at the club and a lot of players moved on, so it was a bit bittersweet. However, I think that's something that Forfar, disappointing, but you hopefully Jim Weir, very experienced, Gavin Price, very experienced as well. You know, they have managed teams who have been on losing streaks, maybe not in as grievous a situation as they are at the moment, but managers who have experienced that will know how to galvanise a dressing room and trying to encourage that winning feeling going into the next game. who it's against. I mean, they're playing Forfar again. They're playing Stranraer again very soon. They're playing them at the start. They've got Peterhead away, and then Forfar, it's Stranraer away. Peterhead away, and then Stranraer away on a Tuesday night. So, aye.
It's an opportunity to make it up, but you didn't fancy them against Peterhead, and then if confidence is rock bottom going into that, that's a fucking huge game.
Yeah.
Huge game at Stair Park.
That is a huge game. I'm saying I might try and get. I'm not going to go down to Stranraer on a Tuesday night. Let's hold your horses there. Hold your horses there. Let's not get carried away.
You have to leave for that.
Oh man, you know what? I've driven down to Stranraer. I've driven down to Stranraer once to watch Stenny. It's not that long. I think 2.5 hours. Give yourself 2.5 hours so you can get down there.
You still need to leave bang on 5 though, wouldn't you?
Pretty much. Like, Craig can have a meeting with you, but it's too late. Just the papers are swung off the desk, and I'm out the door. Particularly if you're leaving Glasgow at that time of night as well.
I probably need to be before then.
Yeah.
Traffic.
I'm not using annual leave to go and watch Stranraer versus Forfar. That was a stupid thing to have said. I was thinking out loud there, and I've embarrassed myself. I'm sorry.
Well, Craig, before we get to the last game, a wee kind of side tangent, talking about embarrassing yourself, I must apologise to the dear reader and yourself, because I've just realised, I realised about 10 minutes ago, but you were in full flow talking about the bottom of League Two, so I thought I'd leave it till now. I have done this entire podcast so far with my mic connected to my earbuds. Okay,
what does that mean?
I have no idea how it sounds. How did that sound to you?
Oh, I didn't think you sounded great, but I just assumed... I just assumed that since you do this for a full-time job, that it must sound all right your end, and since you're the one that's recording this...
Nah, it's been... so my sound would have been poor for this entire podcast, so I can only apologise. I'm going to stop the record right now, start it again with my microphone plugged in this time, and we'll do the last section, and I'll sound like I should do.
Because this is the one I'm genuinely excited to talk about, so looking forward to this. Me too. Okay.
Right, that's a lot better, isn't it?
That is a lot better. I can hear your honeyed voice even clearer now. It sounded like you were speaking through a dictaphone. So I shan't be listening back to this podcast. We'll just say that. I shan't be listening back to it.
Yeah, as well. When you were talking, I was getting this really kind of weird. It's hard to say. Like when I wear these. Do you know when you go through these kind of blind spots? I've got like dodgy like Bluetooth. Like yes. when you're out and about. Yeah. Like my headphones seem to go into this kind of weird mode where it almost feels like they go into like double stereo, and it's a really weird experience. Your voice would do that the entire way through the podcast, and it was like it's fine because it's recorded on your end, so it doesn't matter what I'm hearing. But I was still like, what is that all the way through? And of course it is because I am speaking and hearing out of the same things.
Easily done, mate. Easily done.
Yeah. Okay. So right. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get to one of the highlights of the season so far. Queen's Park 6, East Kilbride 2, after extra time, Challenge Cup semi-final. What a game this was. And I'm just saying that from watching the highlights. All 11 and a half minutes of the highlights. Superb. Not only was it a great game with 8 goals, East Kilbride, a lower league team, playing against away from home to a side who are a few levels above them. It wasn't like Queen's Park put out a wee kind of kiddie odd team as well. They obviously, as most teams do when they get to the semi-final of the Challenge Cup, they want to go and win it. Queen's Park race it a 2-goal lead. East Kilbride come back. Both teams have chances to win it. And then it falls apart for East Kilbride in extra time. But the highlight of this one, along with the action on the park, was the fact that the microphone, or the cameras, were very close to Mick Kennedy and Cy Ferry in the East Kilbride dugout, and you got their basically what was like a running commentary from them throughout the match. I really added to watching the highlights of this.
I think it's important to say that Mick Kennedy was actually suspended from it, so he was actually sitting in the royal box for it.
That's what it was.
However, there were times I looked across, he could actually lean down and shout and pass on instructions, so it was like, it was suspended, but he could still have a degree of control in the game. But no, the bit you're referring to, this is an amazing... I was there last night, as I should say. I was there last night, so this is why I'm really excited to talk about it, because there's so much to discuss from this match. And about the 90th minute, East Kilbride are on the attack, and it's John Robertson who, by and large, had a really good game. But John Robertson cuts inside onto his right foot, and you can hear Simon Ferry, distinctly Simon Ferry, that sort of Dundonian twang, says, "This is it. Party time." And John Robertson shoots and the ball hits the post and bounces out and it's cleared, and had that gone in, that would have won them the game. And it was just a brilliant game of football. And if you haven't seen them, go and watch the highlights, because they are. Queen's Park put together a really, really good package. It's a daft game of football. Really, really good stuff.
It wasn't just that. So that was great as well. Almost the call of the season from Cy Ferry. Because when you mentioned me a bit earlier, I thought he'd maybe said it just when Robertson was about to hit a shot. But he calls it quite early. He calls it as soon as the ball goes out to Robertson. That's right. So he saw it coming, and it was so close. This is it. This is party time. Not quite. Almost party time. And I assume you were there. It was hard to tell from the highlights. I take it that was very late in the match as well.
That was about 89, 90th minute.
Oh, so really, really, really nearly was party time. But it wasn't just that. So you heard them. So they went down quite early in the match. They were a goal down inside the first minute. Kieran McDonald with a dreadful attempted lob pass back to Jamie Hamilton in the middle of the East Kilbride defence. It goes over his head right through for Rudden to open the scoring. And then the second one as well, Queen's Park go 2-0 up. Ryan Duncan scores. That's a bit more of a good move, a good run down the right, and then a good finish from Duncan. But then you can hear Kennedy and Ferry discussing a formation change in the aftermath. And I don't know if they eventually did go through with it or not, but if they did, it certainly seemed to work, because they came roaring back into things.
It was the game. You'd barely taken your seat, so I got into I like being in the ground about half an hour before kick-off. I'm quite weird like that. Doesn't matter who's playing. I like being in the ground.
That's the opposite for me. I like to turn up as soon as they're taking centre.
Nah, I liked watching when the coaches take away the back four and they put them through a wee drill and so on, and I like seeing all that sort of stuff. So I'm a bit weird like that, but barely taking my seat, and then just as ludicrous from Kieran McDonald. McDonald didn't have a particularly good game, I'll say that. I thought he made a couple of errors, just a ludicrous attempt to try and pass the ball, but particularly when you've got someone like Rudden on. Rudden had a good game, and really he used his body well. I think that once he got in front of the ball, used his body well to hold off. I think it was Hamilton that he held off and was able to finish. And the second goal, as you say, really good move. I think that I lost it. I think David Ferguson lost possession, and it's Rocco Hickey-Fugaccia. The space opens up. It's Ian McShane that hasn't to do the chasing. Ian McShane doesn't want to run. Ian McShane just wants to pass the football, and it's a good ball back and a good finish. However, so that's the scene set there. So early doors, Queen's Park are 2 up. But the big criticism we have of East Kilbride is that it maybe goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about Dunfermline. It's very, very slow, the play. Very slow, very measured, very patient. What they always tried to do, or what they tried to do, certainly the opening exchanges, was try to pass the ball around the back, maybe move it into McShane, give it back, move it to McShane, give it back, and then something will open up and they can do a switch out wide for Robertson or for Nathan Flanagan. And when they decide to go a wee bit more direct, that brought dividends. They forced Queen's Park back. And weirdly enough, Queen's Park, up until they scored, all Queen's Park did in that first half was score 2 goals. That sounds a weird thing to say. I thought that the Queen's Park managed the game quite well because they'd obviously done their homework in East Kilbride. It's like, we'll let them have the ball and we'll try and pick them off in the counter. But it was a really, really nice move where the ball was played out wide, and a nice move, but a combination of nice movement and bad defending, because Jack Leach is allowed to saunter into the box. He starts the move, saunters into the box. A really, really nice finish, but there's no one near him. You know, he had time there to pick his shot and get the volley in. And straight away, you could tell East Kilbride, they fancy this a wee bit. There are about 200 fans there. I was sitting in with the East Kilbride fans, and they were noisy. They pretty much sang for most of the game. Good numbers. I think that there are a number of SPFL teams. I suppose maybe for a semi-final they were taking out along a crowd like that. But then after that, the second half, Ian McShane's corner kicks had been problems all night. Jack Wills was the goalkeeper for this one, and I'm going to assume it was that Callum Ferry or Jack Wills was told, "You're going to be my goalkeeper for this competition." Young boy, Callum Ferry's a really good goalkeeper, and I think he might have dealt with him better. But I think Wills was playing because Davidson would have said to him, "You're going to be playing in this competition, and presumably he'll play in the final as well." But he was really struggling with corners that were dumped right on top of him. And McShane was doing it. There was about 5 or 6 of them in a row where they were really good deliveries, and East Kilbride could have maybe done better to take advantage of them. But the ball dumped right on top of Ferguson's head for 2 each. And all of a sudden, you're thinking, this is brilliant. We're going to see what East Kilbride have done in those previous rounds where they've beaten Cove Rangers, beaten Airdrieonians, beaten Ayr United. They're going to add Queen's Park to the scalp. From 2-0 down to 2 each, you think this is going to happen again. And then, so I'm talking a wee bit here, but the second half wasn't quite as entertaining as the first. It was a wee bit more scratchy. I think that both teams were like, East Kilbride were tiring, and Queen's Park had the numbers where they were making changes to try and get something from it, and neither team was able to get a foothold. Zach Rudden, you've seen the highlights, had a really, really good chance at 2 each. I think this is one of the problems with East Kilbride trying to play out from the back. It was just a wee bit daft. I can't remember who it was. That might have been Ferguson, but the ball's launched up in the air. He miscontrols it. Hickey Fagacha closes him down. The ball's up in the air, gets nudged over to Rudden, and he melts over the bar from about 7 yards out. And then not much happened in the game up until John Robertson had that effort.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, I can't believe, I thought it went straight to penalties. Like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe we've got another 30 minutes of this to look forward to.
Yeah, and it really unravelled for East Kilbride in extra time. It wasn't long into the period where Rhys Evans scores for Queen's Park, puts them ahead. And again, Kennedy and Ferry, you could hear both of them. You could hear Kennedy saying to his bench, like, what's he doing? He's got to attach himself to number 23, meaning Ryan Duncan, because it's a ball at the park and he just doesn't, he drifts off him. Duncan picks up and then plays the ball through for Evans to score. So
it takes a big deflection.
It does take a big deflection. So there is a bit. You're right. There is a bit of hard luck in it. And you hear Kennedy shouting, "Shaughan, attach yourself at number 23," and you hear it the next time as well when the next attack for Queen's Park, because again it's another punt up the park, and he shouts it this time beforehand to make sure he does it. And you also hear Ferry. You can hear him a bit more fainter, but you still hear Ferry saying, "Fuck's sake, Shaughan," and then "Fucking hell, Shaughan," and then "Fucking hell, man." For Sean Fagan.
You talk about bad luck for the third goal. I mean, horrendous luck for the fourth man. Poor, because he did a good game. The goalkeeper, Matty Connolly, did actually have a very good game.
Straight out of a Danny Baker video.
Oh man, with a free kick. It's who's it? Was it Ryan Duncan that stands over it?
Yeah,
it's Ryan Duncan that stands over it. It hits the cross, but it hits the post. It just comes back and hits Connolly on the shoulder and goes in. Knew nothing about it, and it's a shame. And then at that point, I got speaking to the boy next to me, I just said, East Kilbride, they're really in danger here. This game absolutely flattening them here. And then straight away, same thing. I think it was Robertson plays a square ball in the middle of the park.
Duncan picks it up through.
Puts through for Rudden, and just a really composed finish into the net.
That was quite literally within the same minute.
Yeah,
it was. You often hear like 2 goals in a minute, but obviously it doesn't quite have that pleasing aspect when you look at like a newspaper or you look at your app or whatever, and it's like 89, 90 or whatever. 2 goals in a minute, but not quite.
They were.
This was literally both literally the 97th minute.
Aye, and then Rhys Evans scores at the end to make it 6-2, and weirdly, I think the scoreline flatters Queen's Park, because it certainly up until extra time it was not. I think if you walked into that game and you didn't know the context at all, you would never know there was such a gulf between the sides. Like East Kilbride were really good here. I think that's something we really have to pay them a lot of credit, because they are really good, and they've been excellent in this competition. They were excellent against Ayr United. They were excellent against here. I think but the scoreline flatters them a wee bit, because Queen's Park had tons of chances at the end to win it. They just ran out of puff, and Mick Kennedy and Simon Ferry should be so proud of the players, the effort they put in, because they did knock their pan in for this one. And if Robertson had scored that, you wouldn't get to this period, but they were just burst by the end. And I think that Queen's Park timed their substitutions really well. Like the boy Evans, they brought in a whole bunch of players, guys I'd never heard of, I'll be honest. But I thought Evans is a boy they'd signed from Leicester's academy. He definitely has something about him. I'd like to see more from him. He looks like a football player. He's sort of big, rangy. I mean, he's only, about 19? And I think once he fills out a bit, he could be an excellent back-to-goal striker. Because when he came on, that's something that that Queen's Park were quite direct in this match. So it was a nice contrast. Everything about this game was just a lot of fun, just the contrast between the sides, like East Kilbride looking to try and play it very principled in what they were looking to do, and Queen's Park just saying, well, fuck it, let's just boot it up to Rudden and let's play off for there. There's a million different ways to win a game of football. Not necessarily what Rudden's best at, but certainly something that Rhys Evans is good at. And I think that while Hamilton and Fagan did well at the pure defending sort of stuff, winning the headers, they did find it a wee bit more difficult when Evans came on. And there's a couple of other young boys they brought on. They brought on, I get what I mean by time in the subbies well, they brought on guys just to bring up the soccer base here with their names on it. They were able to bring on some guys, again, guys I'd never heard of, who were able to give them that bit of thrust. Let's see, the boy that came on, Timam Scott, for instance, have you heard of him? No, a young boy that came through Queen's Park's academy. I checked on the website. It's photos of him with Marion Bucher and his parents. So that kind of shows you how that was 2023. So a simpler time for Queen's Park. But they brought him on. He definitely has something about him. They brought on Josh Hines, who's a bit fast and a bit direct. They were able to time the subs well at the stages of the game that ultimately got them the win. But although that Queen's Park, they'll be delighted with it because it's their first final since 1900, which is great. And they're playing Livingston or Dunfermline, so it's a really good chance to actually win the competition. They'll be delighted with it, and it was a lot of fun. But East Kilbride should be like really, really chuffed. And you can criticise them for saying either they're chucking money at it, or I was going to make the joke that it's a small side who are being pumped to an artificial level because of a backer. But enough about Queen's Park. You could have made a joke like that. But they've been really good in this competition. The last two times I've seen East Kilbride on the telly against there and in person against Queen's Park, really, really good, really, really good.
And I hope that's what people are saying about this podcast, despite my...
I haven't even been able to tell you about the young team up on the hill behind
let's do that before we finish then.
Before we finish up, so you obviously know, you did the podcast with, was it Callum Stewart that did the podcast? I listened to that last Saturday, very good. Go and listen to it on the Patreon. It's basically just a sort of state of the nation of what's going on at Queen's Park at the moment. And he mentioned about the young team that have been, the drums have been prohibited from getting into Hampden or Lesser Hampden. So in protest, the young team were up on a hill. Like Hampden almost sits in like a bowl.
Yeah.
Do you know the geography there? And there's houses up, I think it's Mount Annan Drive that runs parallel with Hampden. So they were sitting up on just behind the just in front of the houses there with flares and with a drum. At one point, I thought there was something happening inside Hampden. I couldn't really, because it was darkness, I couldn't really hear them. It was only till I actually took my seat and could see them up behind the goals. It was really good. So they brought a bit of noise. So I left just before the match finished. So it was when I was leaving the ground and was going back to my car, I could hear the full-time whistle go and the cheers. The young boys had moved to the main stand at Lesser. The young boys were sitting behind that and they were singing songs and playing their drums. And I was walking one way and coming towards them, it was a man and woman walking a dog. And one of the boys said, stop the drums, didn't want to frighten the dog. And they were apologising to the dog walkers. Sorry, we didn't mean to scare your dog. And they just walked away and they made sure they were out of sight. And then they started back up again. So it was really, really sweet. And I hope that Queen's Park just do the right thing and let these young guys come and watch the game, because to sit up on a hill on a really, really cold night and then come and stand behind the ground and just drum and sing. Must have been about 20 of them. That's class. Let them in. Let the boys in. And they were really good. East Kilbride fans were really good. It was just a good game of football. A lot of the games I've been to this season is neutral, like Pollock versus St Cadoc's or the Edinburgh City games I've been to. They've all been a lot of fun.
Speaking about the East Kilbride fans, so were they at the end where the camera is? Because I've wondered who Zach Rudden was shouting at when he scored his second goal.
No, they would have been. So if you're watching if you're looking at the main stand, they would have been up at where East Kilbride scored both their goals. That was the end that East Kilbride fans were at.
All the fans are in the same section, basically.
Yeah. There's only one stand. There's only the one stand there.
So when Rudden scores his second, he definitely kind of shouts at somebody, you can't see where it is because it's the same end as the camera.
I thought it must have been one of his teammates warming up.
Right, okay. Right.
That's what I thought.
Right, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And lesser as well, it's the pitch is immaculate. I think it must be one of the best surfaces in the country. It's not. I've been twice now. Weirdly, I've followed Queen's Park's journey. I was there when they played Edinburgh City. There when they beat East Kilbride. I'm going to have to go to the final now, and just because I feel as though my talisman for Queen's Park. I'll go along and watch them. But
if I'm free, I might go to the final as well. I'll have a look and see if I've got any plans. Otherwise, but
you should, man. We'll go together. I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm going to assume that the game's going to be played. If it's Queen's Park versus Livingston, it's probably going to get played in Airdrie. If it's Dunfermline, it's probably going to get played in Falkirk. We'll go together. I'll drive you. We'll have a laugh. It'll be fine. And we can go to that. We don't have to leave our work early to beat the traffic as well. So it's better than going to Stranraer on a Tuesday night.
And there was one final thing to ask just before we finish. What are you watching in the background while we record this podcast?
I am watching a movie called Exhibit A. It's a found footage movie from Britain in 2008. It's about a guy who goes round the twist because of money problems and ends up killing his family.
Nice. We should.
It's terrible. It's on Amazon Prime.
We should maybe get a Madam Web podcast sorted at some point.
Fucking
release it in the summer.
Fowler, you are talking my language. And then we can do Badil Syndrome 2.
The bedealinging.
Yes. I see him and Hugh Dennis are about to a new Channel 4 documentary, or sort of like, I don't know what genre that would fall into, but it's basically them cycling most places.
Brilliant. Can't wait to watch that.
As long as it keeps David Baddiel off Twitter, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, that'll do us. Craig,
do us.
Thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you. Pleasure. Hope you enjoyed that.
I certainly did. And thank you to everybody for listening. As Telfer has said a couple of times, if you'd like to hear more, then the best way to do so is patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, where we're going to record a show where I'm going to ask Craig some questions about 5 players who've been signed for different clubs in the Scottish lower leagues. And I'm going to have a real good input on one of them, because Curtis Main has dropped down a level. So I've got things to say about Curtis Main. The rest of the guys, maybe not as much.
Well,
that's definitely worth your money. If that's not worth your money, I don't know what is.
If you want to hear Craig Fowler talk about Curtis Main for 4 minutes, chip in.
Goodbye.